If there's one legend or one cryptid that almost everyone in the world has at least heard of, it's Bigfoot. Legends of ape-like creatures may exist all over the world in some form, but the creature known as Bigfoot has its home in North America. And in this video, we'll be looking at a Bigfoot-like creature that was allegedly sighted in the rural town of Fouke, Arkansas. The Boggy Creek monster, also known as the Fouke monster, has allegedly been a legend of that area in Arkansas since the 1840s, with some of the earliest reports coming in 1834 when people reported seeing a large, hairy, wild man roaming the area. Several sightings in the area would be published in an 1851 report in the Memphis Inquirer and in an 1856 report in the Caddo Gazette. In the late 1860s, the creature also supposedly harassed two families that were living outside Fouke. The sightings of the creature would not stop with the turn of the century. In fact, in some cases they even increased. In 1955, a 14-year-old boy allegedly spotted the creature. Not only that, but he also claimed that he had fired on the creature with birdshot, but the creature had barely reacted. He described the creature as having reddish-brown hair and sniffing the air. This particular sighting has been mostly dismissed as a case of mistaken identity. An investigator named Joe Nickel suggested that this sighting was most likely just a misidentified black bear. As I said, the sightings did not stop with the turn of the century, and more sightings would be reported over the years. But it wouldn't be until the 1970s that the creature reached nationwide and even worldwide attention. Bobby Ford and his wife Elizabeth had lived in their new home for less than a week when strange things started happening. For several nights they heard something roaming around outside their property, but they could never find the creature or even person responsible. On Saturday, May 1st, 1971, Elizabeth was sleeping on the couch when she was suddenly awoken by a noise at the screen window. Still groggy from sleep, she looked over at the window and saw the curtains moving on the front window. Then she also noticed a hand sticking through the window. At first, she thought that it was a bear's paw, but she soon realized that while this hand was hairy and had claws, it did not resemble the paw of a bear. The only sound this creature made was heavy breathing. As her eyes were now adjusting to the darkness, she could now see the creature's eyes, which she would later describe as resembling coals of fire. Really red eyes that were staring at her. Bobby and his brother Don, who was visiting, immediately ran outside. They shot at the creature several times, which caused it to move away. The creature had not left entirely, though. They would then call the local constable, and while the men waited on the porch of the house, they soon spotted the creature moving closer to the house again. They opened fire once again and believed that they had hit it. Thinking that the creature had now been wounded or dead, they headed over to the area where they believed that the creature had fallen, but it wasn't there. Confused by this, the men suddenly heard the women in the house screaming and immediately ran back to the house. They split up to search around the house. As he was walking up the steps of the house, Bobby was suddenly grabbed by a hairy arm and found himself face to face with a creature that had fiery red eyes. He would struggle against the creature and managed to fall down the porch and onto the ground. With the tumble to the ground, Bobby was able to get away from the creature and he immediately got up and ran around the house and through the front door. The other men had been on the other side when this happened, so they hadn't seen anything, but they heard Bobby's shouting and ran towards the noise. Bobby's attacker with the fiery red eyes was very fast, and there were no signs of it when the other men came running. The constable, Ernest Walraven, arrived at around 12:35 a.m. and he would search the surrounding fields and woods for about an hour without finding anything. He then decided to give the Fords his shotgun and his light before he left again. But only a short time later, Walraven would be called back to the area, with the Fords telling him that the creature had now returned and that they had once again shot at it. This time, the constable decided to stick around and he stayed with the family until 5 a.m. Nothing else happened that night. The following morning, May 2nd, they would all walk around the house to see if there were any traces of the previous night's events, and there were some. They found several strange three-toed tracks, several scratch marks on the front porch that also appeared to have been made by something with 3 claws. At least 2 of the windows were damaged, and several pieces of tin nailed around the bottom of the house had been ripped away. This incident attracted a great deal of interest after the news spread about the events at the home. This even led to a radio station posting a bounty on the creature, leading to increased interest in hunting the creature. So much so, in fact, that Miller County Sheriff Leslie Greer was forced to put a temporary no-guns policy in place in order to preserve public safety. Interest in the creature would die down somewhat until March 1978, when tracks would reportedly be found by 2 brothers prospecting in Russellville, Arkansas. Then, with increased interest in the creature, more and more sightings would be reported. In fact, the creature would even be blamed for missing livestock and attacks on several dogs during the late 1970s. Since the 1970s, the sightings of the creature have been more sporadic, but it does increase periodically. For instance, the creature was allegedly seen jumping from a bridge in 1991, and in 1997 there were 40 reported sightings of the creature in that year alone. The events that allegedly occurred at the Ford home have inspired several films, most notably The Legend of Boggy Creek from 1973, which focuses on Bobby Ford's supposed encounter with the beast. And even more films and documentaries have been made since then. As recently as 2016, there was a documentary made about it called The Boggy Creek Monster. The most common explanation for the Boggy Creek Monster is that the reported sightings of the creature are just sightings of black bears, like the sighting of 1951 that was said to be just a misidentified black bear. In fact, when it comes to Bigfoot sightings, American black bears are said to be the most likely culprit for most of the sightings, at least according to mainstream scientists. The argument here is that when you see a creature from afar, in dense foliage or even in poor lighting conditions, it's very easy to misidentify the creature you're seeing and for you to think that you're seeing something else. Another point to this argument is that black bears have been observed walking upright, often as a result of an injury. And while they're upright, adult black bears stand roughly 1.5 to 2 meters tall, or 5 to 7 feet, which does match the supposed size of a Bigfoot. There are, of course, other proposed explanations for the Bigfoot sightings, such as escaped apes or even other humans. There have been cases where people have been hunting a Bigfoot and accidentally shot another member of their group. Feral humans or even hermits have been proposed as possible culprits for Bigfoot. There's also the argument that pareidolia might explain some of the sightings. Pareidolia is when you see familiar objects or patterns in otherwise random or unrelated objects or patterns, such as seeing a face in your morning coffee or in the bushes outside your house. Of course, to many people who believe in Bigfoot, none of these explanations hold up. As for the tracks that were found in 1978, they have mostly been dismissed as a hoax. For instance, in 1986, the mayor of Fouke, Virgil Roberts, was of the opinion that the three-toed tracks were man-made. He suggested that the tracks were made by someone walking with stilts, and he speculated that this person was either trying to get some attention or make some money. That same year, 1986, former Miller County Sheriff Leslie Greer, who had led expeditions of law officers through the swamps searching for any proof of the creatures, and who also had to put a temporary no-guns policy in place in order to preserve public safety, had also reached the conclusion that the tracks were fake. But in his opinion, it did put Fouke on the map, so there was no real harm done. Interest in the Boggy Creek monster has not disappeared. It is said to be a Bigfoot or Sasquatch type creature after all, which arguably are some of the most famous cryptids in the world. And that connection alone will still draw some eyes to Fouke, Arkansas, and to whatever is lurking in the woods and the swamps.